So I was at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis for 40 years as director of research, and I used to worry about banks. Now I worry about babies. I won't talk about the transition, how I got from banks to babies, and I don't want to go with too big to fail as to too little to fail, but that's where I'm at now. I'd like to frame my remarks this morning around two questions. One is, what is research? What are the lessons from research? What have we learned from research on early childhood education? And then the second question is, given these lessons, how should we think about improving public policy, given the research? Okay? So let me turn to the research, and I'm going to assert the research is overwhelming. It's overwhelming that we're way under-investing in early childhood education. So I'm an economist. My takeaway on the research is early childhood development is economic development, and it's economic development with a very high public return. Now, there's a number of different studies. There's a range. I'm going to argue the range is roughly between 10 and 20%. I'll get into that. Like all science, it's not precise, but when I say it's overwhelming research and we're way under investing, it's because we can get you double-digit returns. I don't know what you're getting at the bank today, but I'm guessing you're not getting double-digit. So why is it economic development? Why do I talk about it as economic development? Post-World War II, virtually every, what economists call economic miracle, whether it's Japan, South Korea, China, India, Poland today, a critical ingredient is how well these countries invested in their human capital, okay? It was clearly true over the last 50 years that human capital became much more important to the U.S. economy. Minnesota's got one of the best economies in the country because we're such a highly educated workforce. Our women are terrific for a whole lot of reasons. But then the question is, okay, so we know we need to do a better job investing in human capital. Where is, this is economists talking, where is the best investment? So I'm going to argue it's in early childhood education. My former colleague at the Federal Reserve Bank, Rob Grunwald, and I were asked, actually a former governor of the state of Minnesota and mayor of Minneapolis, to take an economic look at this literature. Now, there are 3 longitudinal studies, and you may be familiar with them. I'm going to talk about one in particular. That's the Perry Preschool. There's the Abecedarian and the Chicago study, the Child Parent Center studies. I'm going to talk about Perry Preschool, but all 3 come to the same basic conclusion. Again, a very high return. Perry Preschool, 123 families in the early, these are low-income poverty family, at-risk families. Ypsilanti, Michigan, 1963, have 123 families, randomly divide them into 2 groups. Economists generally don't have those kind of experiments, right? I mean, at the Federal Reserve, we were not allowed to kind of do experiments with the economy. That's a no-no. But here we have a literature in which we have a randomized control group. Methodology doesn't get much better. Half the kids got a very high-quality program. We can debate about what high quality is, but it's master-level teachers, small classroom size, engage the parents' home visits, okay? And then there's the program group. Rob and I had 30 years of data, and we asked a very simple question. The cost of the program in today's dollars, roughly $11,000 per year. So these are 3- and 4-year-olds, $22,000 investment. You invested in these kids. What was the return on that investment? Because what we found, what scholars have found before us, we were just kind of reporting, the kids who were in the high-quality program were less likely to need special ed, were less likely to be retained in the 1st grade, were more likely to be literate by the 6th grade, graduate high school, get a job, pay taxes, stay off welfare. Crime rate between the 2 groups goes down 50%. So we have the cost of the program and we have benefits. Economists can put dollar values on almost anything, and we did, especially the cost of crime, which is huge. And then we asked the question, what was the return on the investment? Under certain conditions, you can take those dollar benefits, dollar costs, and back out the annual rate of return on that investment. Again, I wanted you to think about this as economic development. I won't get into this, but we spend billions of dollars around the country on so-called economic development, cities and states bidding for companies, about $90 billion, the New York Times estimated, and it's a 0 return. We end up moving people around. We don't create any jobs. We can beat zero, okay, with early ed. The other hurdle might be 5.8%. That's the annual rate of return on the stock market post-World War II. So think of 5.8%, because if you're going to take money out of the private sector, put it into some public program, you better do better than the private sector. So 5.8 is our hurdle. We got an 18% inflation-adjusted return from the Perry preschool program. So when we say we're way under-investing, that's what I mean by that. I can tell you my venture capitalist buddies, if they saw an 18% annual return on an investment, wouldn't go unfunded for very long. It just wouldn't. Okay. I say the research is overwhelming because it's not just Perry. It's Abecedarian, it's the Chicago. Chicago's also getting these high 18% returns. They got 30 years worth of data. We know how to do this. Independent of this, totally independent research is a neuroscience research. Very poignant. It tells us that these foundation years, prenatal to 5, you'll hear more from Jack on this, Jack Shonkoff, that they're critical years for brain development. And if a child's living in a stressful environment, that brain doesn't develop properly. All points to the same lesson here. You got to start early. Okay. So that's the research. Second question. So what does it say about public policy? What do we do about this? I'm going to argue there's some challenges here. Whatever Rob and I on our second essay, whatever we're going to propose, better focus on the poverty children. Why is that? That's the low-hanging fruit, if you will. We call these our high-return children. That's when we know we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. Better engage the parents and empower those parents. I don't think you get these kind of returns if you don't go get those parents involved. Better be high quality. Don't get it if it's not high quality. You better start early. That's what the neuroscientists are telling us. Prenatal to 5, I call those our foundation years. And finally, you better be able to scale it up. I know there's some wonderful people out there doing some great things in various cities. I've met many of them, incredible programs, but it's tough to scale at Jeffrey Canada in Harlem, right? How do you clone Jeffrey? So, a couple of economists, what's our proposal? Very simple. We call it a market-based approach, and I'll explain why. But it's very simple. Scholarships. Scholarships not for children to go on to college, to go to Harvard or MIT or whatever, but scholarships for 3- and 4-year-old kids to go to high-quality early childhood education programs. Pretty simple. What about the early years? We really call them Scholarship Plus. The scholarships includes money for home visiting mentors. Actually, there's some terrific research by David Oles showing home visiting nurses in particular, starting prenatal, make a huge difference on health and long-term outcomes. So we combine that research along with the scholarships. We cover our parents prenatal to 5. Scale, I'm going to claim, it's always difficult to scale anything. I'm going to claim this is relatively easy to scale. So those are the challenges, and I'm going to claim that the scholarship approach is easy to scale. It starts early. Scholarships have to be used at a 4-star rated program. That's how we deal with quality, and clearly we're focusing on the poverty kids. So there is the challenge. There is a policy recommendation to meet those challenges, and let me just conclude by saying it's more than just theory, because I was fortunate that the business community, the business leaders in the state of Minnesota, this includes the CEO of Cargill and Target and Best Buy and Ecolab, the list goes on. We formed something called the Minnesota Early Learning Foundation, MELF. They said, okay, Rolnick, let's see if it works in practice. We raised $20 million privately, did 2 flagship programs. One, we created a quality rating system. We call it Parent Aware. It's a 4-star rating system. And the other half of the money went for scholarships. We circled the neighborhood. We provided 650 families with scholarships. We're already getting incredible results, and not just from the children, but from the parents as well. These parents feel empowered and engaged. Many of them are going back to school. They're now engaged in their kids' education. Our kids in the 1st grade are now looking very close to the majority kids in terms of cognitive skills. But maybe more important are their executive function. We'll give you more data on that later on, maybe in 5 years, to show you how much better they're doing. And fortunately, the state is now moving in this direction, and we're hoping to now move gradually, but move to bring this to scale. So the ultimate goal is every poverty child in the state of Minnesota will have access to to high-quality early childhood education. And I'm going to argue for the state of Minnesota, and as well as for the country, you won't find a better economic development investment. You don't want to get me started. We just spent $500 million on a new stadium for the Minnesota Vikings, and the state just gave $250 million to the Mall of America because we don't have enough shops in the state of Minnesota. So there's political issues, obviously. Our kids don't have the kind of political clout that the Vikings do, but recognize we know how to do this, and here is a proposal. There may be a better one out there, but we think this is a proposal that will meet the needs of our society. Thank you.